President,
The senator from California.
move that we suspend the quorum call.
Without objection.
Mr. President, last year, Senate Democrats presented to Senate Republicans a proposal meant to fix some of the partisan gridlock that slowed down the confirmation process for both parties over the years. I rise to speak to it because of the pending action that Senate Republicans have teed up to change the rules or utilize the nuclear option to set a new precedent for how nominees are considered and or confirmed in this body. And so it's not a new conversation, not a new effort that has come up just overnight. There have been efforts over the years to revisit this, including last year by Senate Democrats. And I referenced that proposal from last year because it was intentional. It was presented at a time when nobody knew who would be elected President of the United States. It was done at a time when no one knew who would be occupying or which party would be occupying the White House and be charged with filling key positions in the federal government. It was done at a time when we were not sure who would be in the majority of this body. And so it was an ideal time to discuss and implement reforms on a nonpartisan basis. It was a chance for the two sides to come together in a bipartisan fashion and negotiate a change to the Senate rules at a 67-vote threshold for the purpose of improving the process, improving the Senate as an institution. Now, Democrats proposed ideas out of the interest of fairness, of reform, and of making this institution work better. Unfortunately, at the time, my understanding is the Republican response was basically, no, we're not really interested. They wouldn't play ball. They didn't want to be part of the solution because they were busy at the time obstructing Democratic nominees. Now, fast forward to today, we know that Donald Trump is in the White House. Not only is he in the White House, he is nominating historically underqualified nominees, political hitmen, loyalists, and extremists. And surprise, surprise, guess who all of a sudden has changed their tune? Not only do Senate Republicans now want to revisit the nominations process and the confirmation process, they're doing it in a way that can have them very, very quickly confirm unlimited numbers of these nominees. And they're doing so in a way without trying, not even trying to build bipartisan support for these changes. They're threatening to go nuclear once again and only require a 50-vote threshold. So you have to wonder why. Maybe because they want to hide some of Donald Trump's most controversial nominees. Just look at who they've worked so quickly to confirm over the last several months. Let me give a couple of examples of the kind of Republican nominees who could have qualified for mass consideration with hardly any oversight under this new proposed process. Nominees like Kash Patel, a conspiracy theorist who made a target list of Trump's perceived enemies, who's now been elevated to serve as director of the FBI. Dan Bonino, a far-right podcaster turned Epstein apologist, confirmed as deputy director of the FBI. Todd Blanche, Trump's personal criminal defense lawyer, who represented him when he was convicted of concealing hush money payments to Stormy Daniels, he's now the deputy attorney general. And by the way, paid recently a very high-profile visit to a certain Ghislaine Maxwell in federal prison. for her role in the whole Epstein saga. Russell Vought, the architect of a scheme to steal hundreds of billions of dollars from the American people and illegally stop funding critical housing and food assistance programs, he's now returned as OMB director. The same Russell Vought who has publicly said and advocated for less bipartisan actions when it comes to appropriations and more partisan determinations on our federal government's spending plan. E.J. Antoni, slated to replace the head of the Bureau of Labor Statistics, who Trump fired after he didn't like the July jobs numbers. Someone who has a history of making sexually degrading attacks, homophobic remarks, promoting conspiracy theories, and lobbing crude insults at anyone critical of the president. Look, there's dozens more nominees coming before the Senate who repeatedly denied the legitimacy of the 2020 election in order to please Trump. And it doesn't stop there. Now, many of these nominees have also committed to dismantling the very departments, agencies, and programs that they're tapped to lead. And while we're not there yet, I might add that the next chair of the Federal Reserve will not be subject to the cabinet-level confirmation process either. Colleagues, this is not normal. And so that is the context for what we're debating. Not a truly bipartisan reform, but a Republican-engineered plan to ram through Trump's unfit nominees to implement an extreme agenda. And sadly, the truth is, it's not surprising, because time and time again under this president, especially this term, we've seen Republicans in Congress give up responsibility to serve as a check and a balance on the executive branch in order to please Donald Trump. In just about every way imaginable, Republicans are inventing new ways to cede power to Trump on appropriations, on tariffs, on oversight, on foreign policy. And today it's not just that they're ceding power to Trump, they're going nuclear for the third time since May, changing the rules of this body unilaterally to do it. Just as they did earlier this year when they revoked 3 of California's Clean Air Act waivers. And just like they did when they abused the Budget Act with magic math to take away health care for millions of people and give trillions in tax cuts to billionaires. In every instance, the arguments they made for going nuclear just don't pass muster. President Trump has actually seen more of his civilian, non-judicial nominees confirmed before the August recess in this term than he did in his first term. This year was 128 compared to 126 in the year 2017. He's also had 14 more of those nominees confirmed before the August recess than President Biden did by the same date, 128 to 114. So I've got to say, it seems like our colleagues are forgetting what it was like over the prior 4 years, when many Republican senators had blanket holds on dozens of nominees at a time. Republican senators blocking all Department of Justice nominees for a significant time period. Republican senators blocking all State Department nominees for a significant time period. One Republican senator even holding up routine promotions for all Department of Defense nominees. Yes, Department of Defense. Department of Defense. For nearly a year, he did so, and it was a national scandal, a national embarrassment. Dozens of military families stuck in limbo for partisan Republican reasons that had nothing to do with their qualifications or ability to serve. Now, there's this Republican outrage for nominees having to wait a couple of months to go through the process. And their colleagues already forget what was happening just before this August recess. Senate Democrats, again, despite the political climate that we're in, trying to negotiate in good faith. There was a bipartisan proposal on the table to expedite some nominees. What happened to that? I'll tell you what happened to that. Donald Trump said no. And he made a mockery of good faith negotiations just less than 2 months ago. He told Leader Schumer and Senate Democrats, and I'm going to quote, he said, "Go to hell." But that's par for the course for Donald Trump. He has contempt for bipartisan negotiations and for checks and balances, the very checks and balances in our Constitution. And that's the reason we're here today. No one is fooled about what's happening here. It's clearly yet another power grab. Republicans are prepared to go nuclear and change Senate rules once again with a simple majority vote. And I'll end simply by saying, once again, that what goes around comes around. Because at some point in time in the future, not only will there be a Democratic president back in the White House, there will be a Democratic majority in the Senate chambers as well. And I guess we'll have to abide by the new rules and new precedents that Republicans are so happy to set today. So be prepared, because I know I'll be. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor.